Jessii Vee. I hope you all had a great Easter. And as you can tell by the title of today's video, the topic is not gonna be happy or lovely or wonderful. It's actually very dark and tragic. This is the story of Gore Orphanage, which is as bad as it sounds. So many horrible, tragic things happen there that to this day, the property is said to be extremely haunted. But before I get into that story, I just want to let you guys know that I'm wearing the crescent moon necklace. This is our white quartz version. There's also an amethyst one and there is a rose colored one, which is not pictured on the website, but it will be. But yeah, it comes in white, purple, and pink. And I just love them. I love crescent moons, so I will put a link to them down below in the description. All right, guys, so let's talk about Gore Orphanage. Now, when this orphanage in Ohio was first built, it was actually originally called Light of Hope Orphanage. And it was started up by a man named Johann Sprunger. The orphanage was located on Gore Road, and because people began recognizing this popular building with the road, its name was eventually changed to Gore Orphanage. And when you find out what really happened at this place, you will realize that it's unfortunately a very fitting name. This orphanage has a horrible history. What's really strange is that before this orphanage was built, Johann Sprunger and his wife had a former orphanage that mysteriously burnt down in a fire. 3 orphan girls were reported to have perished in this fire, and so they moved to Ohio and built a new one, because that's what you do. What people find really odd is that Johann and his wife always seem to be surrounded by death somehow. Their previous orphanage burnt down and people died, then they lost their 7-year-old daughter, then they lost their son at birth, and 2 of their other businesses also burnt down in a fire. So what the heck is going on? I just don't understand why they decided to build a whole new orphanage if their lives just seem to have this extreme bad luck following them. So let's get into the history of the property, because this is actually very, very important. Because before I talk about what happened within the walls of the orphanage, you should know the history of the property that it was built on. When they first discovered the property they wanted to build on, it consisted of 4 sets of farm buildings. And there was this one giant abandoned mansion that was apparently owned by a man named Joseph Swift, who was a very successful farmer. Inside the mansion, there were many rooms with elaborate furnishings, ornate woodwork, marble columns, and other lavish decorations. But it seemed like he had a lot of bad things that happened to him while he was living there. First, his 5-year-old daughter died, and then a little while later, his 24-year-old son died. And then soon after, he lost all of his money, so he sold his giant mansion to a guy named Nicholas Wilbur, who was known for doing some very creepy things. Nicholas Wilbur would hold mysterious rituals and seances in the mansion and would frequently try to speak with the spirits of deceased children. And then one day, sort of out of the blue, his 4 grandchildren all died of a sudden sickness. And reportedly, he buried them on the property, like right in front of the mansion. His wife, Mrs. Wilbur, was said to go absolutely insane by the tragedy. Stories were told that she'd set the table 3 times a day and passed the food to the children as if they were sitting there, and then at night she would light a lamp and say things like, "Time for bed, children, come on," and then she would put these invisible children to bed that weren't actually there. And people were wondering if she was actually seeing their spirits because of all the weird seances and stuff that Mr. Wilbur did. Then in 1901, the home was abandoned because everyone who lived there had terrible misfortune, and so almost immediately teenagers started coming to the area and started daring each other to enter this really haunted mansion. It just became known as like a famous place for tragedy, so it was abandoned for quite some time. And guess who wanted to build the orphanage right on that property? Johann Sprunger. He built the orphanage in this area, and almost immediately horrible things started happening. The orphan children would run away from the home, often wading through the Vermilion River just to escape. And the children also told these horrible stories of abuse, neglect, slave labor. Johann and his wife were not treating the children well there at all. For meals, the children were given calf's lungs, hog heads, sick cattle, and they just like fed all this horrible food to the kids. Apparently, corn was boiled in the same pot that was used to boil soiled underwear. And although there were cows on the farm, children were said to often only be given butter once a week and occasionally pepper or sugar. The children's rooms were infested with rats and vermin, and on occasions the rats would even climb into the beds of the children and would bite them in their sleep. There was said to be only one bathtub for the boys, which they were only allowed to use every 2 weeks, and the bathwater was never changed. So obviously children started to come down with these sicknesses, diseases, in which they wouldn't be treated or even sent to a doctor. So obviously there were so many rumors about children passing away from this, and Johan and his wife would just cover it up. And witnesses said that these children weren't even receiving any type of schooling whatsoever, which is mainly why they were there for. In 1909, an investigation was finally started. So police went there, looked around, saw that the children were being horribly mistreated. But because the state of Ohio at the time had no laws or regulations pertaining to the operation of institutions like this, nothing could formally be done about the conditions at this orphanage. And the Sprungers even admitted to all of the allegations against them. And the police literally stood there and were like,
well, there's nothing we can do because there's no laws in Ohio saying they can't do this.
Like, how awful is that? Like, what was even the point of the investigation then? Well, Mr. Sprunger died 2 years after the investigation, and the doors of the orphanage permanently closed in July of 1916 after years of financial troubles. So all of the children that were going to this orphanage were dispersed throughout the community or given back to their relatives, or they just somehow found a home to live in. And many of those poor children were too afraid or too traumatized to even talk about what happened to them there. Today, all that remains of the orphanage are blocks from its foundation. It's located deep in the woods, and its remnants are now scrawled with graffiti left behind by late-night visitors. They stand in the forest like guidestones for all those daring enough to seek an experience of the legend of the Gore Orphanage. Perhaps the lost souls of the children did descend upon the infamous area where many of the living are known to go in search of the spirits of forgotten children. Perhaps they also seek the ghosts of the Wilbur children. Johann Sprunger's body was buried in a cemetery in Indiana, but some say his soul still wanders the grounds of where the orphanage used to be. Ghostly apparitions, balls of light, haunting screams of children, and visions of fire have been reported by many visitors to the Gore Orphanage Road, and many claim to have found the dusty fingerprints of children when returning to their cars. So yeah, this area is just so ridden with paranormal activity. People see spirits, hear spirits because of all the tragic things that happened here. Now guys, I could make an entire series about orphanages. It is appalling what these places used to do, and because of that, there are so many hauntings of these institutions. So if you want me to continue talking about this and do like a series on each orphanage, I definitely can. So let me know down below if you want me to do that, and give this video a thumbs up to let me know. But I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. Sorry the content of today's video was so dark. I know I talk about a lot of dark things, but when it comes to like children and stuff, it really messes with me. Anyways though guys, if you would like a crescent moon necklace, I have linked it down below, but I hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!